Stop. Okay, percent. Well, hello, people on the Zoom. Last time we couldn't see you. Now I see you. Okay. Okay, so last week, just a quick review for those who weren't here and those who forgot already. Mostly me. Okay, we started this course, which is on parents and children in halacha. We spoke about the fact that these are emotional, instinctive kinds of relationships, and it's kind of hard to set laws that concern emotions. And we went from there to a discussion of the relationship between Torah law and natural morality. And we looked at different philosophical opinions about that. That's not a resolved question. We saw the Eish Kodesh, who says there is no natural morality, there's only the Torah to define good and evil. We saw Rav Lichtenstein, who said that there is natural morality, but the Torah supersedes natural morality. We saw Rav Moshe Glasner, who said that Torah has morality, but there's also morality outside of the Torah. And Rav Kook, who says that Torah takes Derech Eretz Kadma Torah, we need to take the natural morality and elevate it spiritually through the Torah. And Torah without the natural ethics or the natural morality is corrupt. And then we started with the first Mishnah, which said that Ha'av eino chayav b'mizonot bito, that a father is not required to support his daughter. Which seemed very difficult to see. What does that mean? A father not supporting his daughter morally? It's very difficult. And then we saw the different interpretations of, very loud in the hall. I guess we'll leave it open. They'll probably all just go into class in a minute or so. Whether the laws that are given that govern how a family works, are they b'diavad? Are they like for the situation when a family breaks down, where the family is dysfunctional, so therefore we need the laws? Or is this the Torah giving us moral guidance on what we want our family to look like, what we want the values of the family to be? And then we spoke also about the different categories of children. That when the Torah says you don't support your daughter, when the Mishnah says you don't have to support your daughter, it's not talking about children under the age of 6, and it's not talking about adults, which is obvious that you don't have to support them. We're talking in the category somewhere in between 6 until maturity. At the end, we spoke about the woman's role, and because there's the tension between really what is the obligation of the husband? Is it the obligation to the mother? Is it the obligation to the child? Is it part of the contract of the marriage? And we spoke about the 2 roles of a woman as Chava and Isha, as both a person, a human being, and a mother. That was where we ended last time. So basically, in terms of making progress in the Gemara itself, we've read the Mishnah. And in the Mishnah, we saw the basic statement of Ha'av eino chayav b'mizonot bito, that the father is not required to support the daughter. And then we had that interesting statement of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Zem midrash darash, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah lefnei chachamim b'kerem b'Yavna, that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah gave this exposition of that statement in Yavne. And what did he say? He said, Habanim Yershu v'Habanim Yizonu. The rule is that the sons are the ones who inherit, and the daughters are supported, right? So then he extrapolates from that. That's okay. Yeah, there's a little stuffy. He extrapolates from that rule that the sons inherit and the children and then the daughters are supported. He extrapolates from that. The inheritance to the boys comes only after the father dies. So therefore, he says, the daughters are only supported after the father dies. Very strange statement. And from that, we are going to go into the Gemara. We spoke about all the different kinds of questions that we could raise on this Mishnah. And now we're going to see what the Gemara does with it. Okay. Let's start. That's this one. Okay. Fine. I will blow you away. Otherwise, I'll move. Okay. Okay, so the first thing the Gemara is going to say in source 1 on your page, looking at the Mishnah that says, the father is not required to support the daughter. Right away, the Gemara comes along and says, in source 1, b'mizonot bito hu de'eno chayav, ha-b'mizonot b'no chayav. Well, if the Mishnah went out of the way to point out that the daughter isn't supported, it must mean that the son is supported. Did I give you the wrong page? No, that's not true. No, it's okay. No, Barbara had asked for last week's sheet, so I'm taking them out as well. Okay. So the first thing the Gemara says is, if the Mishnah went out of the way to point out that the daughter doesn't have to be supported, that must mean that the son is supported. Because why else would it say it that way? Right? With me on this? Okay. Bito nami.
Doesn't make it better, it makes it worse.
It makes it worse. Like we're pointing out that the daughter doesn't have to be supported. And the son does. Okay. Bito nami, but wait, we're gonna soften the blow a little now. Okay. Chovahu deleka ha-mitzvah ika. We're not chayav. We have to look very closely at the language that the Mishnah uses. It says you are not chayav, you are not obligated to support the daughter. So the Gemara learns from that. You're not obligated, but it's still a mitzvah to do it. Okay? Difference between something you're obligated to do and something that is a good deed to do, right? There are mitzvot that we are obligated in, like you must, what's a good obligation? You must light candles for Shabbat, right? You can't say, oh, I don't feel like lighting candles for Shabbat. But you can say, I don't feel like eating an apple now, so I'm not going to make a bracha on an apple. So there are things that are chayav, and there are things that are also tzedakah. We don't have a certain chiyuv. We can say, okay, you get it. Okay, so the Gemara added 2 points about our Mishnah here. One, that since it points out the daughter in this statement, it obviously doesn't apply to the son. And one, that even though you're not obligated, it's still a mitzvah, it's still a good deed to support your daughter. Well, that's nice.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the way the Gemara works, right, is we have the Mishnah. Mishnah is Tanaitic material. Tanaitic means from the time of the Mishnah, right? There is other Tanaitic material. Those are called Braitot. Braita means from the outside. These are the Tanaitic texts that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi chose not to include in his Shisha Sidrei Mishnah when he built the Mishnah. So we're always going to be bringing back in the Gemara the Braitot, the external Tanaitic sources, to try and make sure that everything works. So the first thing the Gemara asks in source 2 on your page, Mani matnitin. The Gemara is always very interested to know who made this statement. Who made the statement in our Mishnah that said, because there are lots of opinions and we want to know where we're coming from this. And it answers itself, Lo Rabbi Meir, Lo Rabbi Yehuda, but Lo Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. These 3 people, it's not. Why does it say that? Because obviously it has in mind a certain text where all three of those express their opinion, and it doesn't seem to match any of them. Okay, so that's what we're gonna look for at first. Ditanya. Continuation of source 2. Mitzvah lazunat habanot, kal vachomer lebanim. Okay, so now remember we've moved over into the idea of mitzvah and not chiyuv. Okay, so this Braita comes to teach us that there is a mitzvah to support the daughters, kal vachomer labanim, even more so the sons. Why is it more important, more of a mitzvah to support the sons than it is to support the daughters? The aske b'Torah, because they learn Torah, so we should support them so that they could learn Torah. Divrei Rabbi Meir. So the first thing we have here is Rabbi Meir's opinion. That's in our Braita that says that they're both a mitzvah, but the sons more because they learn Torah. Next opinion, Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Mitzvah lazunat habanim, v'kal vachomer labanot, mishum ziluta. So now Rabbi Yehuda says, no, I think it's the opposite. It's a mitzvah to support the sons, but the daughters even more so. Why? Because it's dishonorable. Like, we don't want our daughters going out into the street looking for work, knocking door to door, begging. It's not. It's not appropriate. It's not sanua. It's not honorable. We don't want our women out on the street like that. So if you have to support someone, even more so the daughter. Okay, that's the second opinion. The third opinion is Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omer chova. We've gone back to the language of obligation. Chova lazunat habanot la'achar mitat avihen. Aval b'chayei avihen elu ve'elu einan nizonim. So he doesn't see anything that has to do with mitzvah, only obligations, and the only obligation is to feed them after the father dies. Just like we saw in the exposition in the Mishnah, that just like the sons inherit after death, daughters are supported.
So supported by the community.
Supported by the father's estate. Okay, now I just want to take a sidestep here, because this is a perfect place to introduce. Steinsaltz has 4 basic principles of how the Talmud works, and we see them here. So the first principle is that Mishnayot and any Tanaitic sources are incontrovertible and unchallengeable. In other words, if you have something that comes from a Tanaitic source, whether it is a Mishnah or a Braita, it doesn't prioritize the Mishnah over the Braita. They're both incontrovertible sources. That means whatever happens now, we're going to have to make it all work together, because they are,
Even if they contradict each other.
even if they contradict each other, they are unchallengeable. Okay, that's the first principle of Rav Steinsaltz. The second one is that these sources are precise and accurate in every detail. Okay, meaning that we can look at the wording and we can explain the wording for what it is. We can look at the order of, if they bring like, a few things in a series, we could say, well, they obviously had a thought behind the order that they put it in. You can you can choose, like, you can analyze the choice of language, why they used one word and not another word. Like here, it said chovah and not mitzvah. We can analyze all of those things. And that's called diuk, like lidayek, to be very precise. So the second principle is that all sources, all these Tanaitic sources, are precise and accurate in every detail. Okay. Third principle of Rav Steinsaltz is, now that we have these sources, we are going to strive for unity. What does that mean? We need to find why we have differing viewpoints and how we can unite them to work together, right? Like you said, if 2 things contradict each other, we're going to have to make it work. We're going to have to find a way that these 2 things are both accurate. So how are we going to do that? First thing we do is limit the points that they are in conflict. Exactly. Okay, so if we say example of this. If we give an example that you are allowed to do A, and you're not allowed, and then the second example is you're not allowed to do A. Okay, you're allowed to. I'm drawing a blank here. Okay, you're allowed to do A and you're not allowed to do A. We have two sources, so what are we gonna say? They're exactly opposite. How are we gonna make them work together? We're gonna say, you're allowed to do A when it's whole, and you're not allowed to do A when it's Shabbat. Now they work, because they're no longer in conflict, even though the words themselves are opposite. Now the concepts have been limited to two different time zones, and now they're not in conflict anymore. So that is the first way that we strive for unity, that we make the sources work. The other one is, we're going to take the words and reinterpret them in a way that makes them more broadly accepted. The thing that we're going for is aliba de kule alma, according to everyone. The best thing that it can happen is when we read sources and at the end we can say, according to everyone, this is the bottom line. That's what we're going with. Okay, so that's the third one, the unity. The fourth point is everything stated in the statements is significant. So that means if something is repeated somewhere, this also applies to the Torah, right? Whenever you see that words are repeated in the Torah, what's going to happen? The Gemara is going to come and it's going to give a drash. It's going to say, this word came to teach us this, but the second time it appears, it came to teach us something else. There isn't just an extra word, right? So every time something looks repetitive or extraneous, we're going to have to prove its purpose. And this comes up a lot in the Gemara. You'll see words like pshita. Pshita means it's obvious. Well, that's not a good thing that it's obvious, because if something is obvious, it shouldn't have been stated. The fact that we say that everything has significant meaning means that if something could be logically deduced, it wouldn't have been said. The Tannaitic rabbis are only going to say things that can't be logically deduced, because svara, logic, is a perfectly reasonable way of getting to things. And if you can get there that way, then there's no reason to make a statement about it. So if something is pshita, something is pashut, something is obvious, we're going to have to say why it's not obvious, because otherwise that statement wouldn't have been made. If something is pointed out to us and it doesn't seem like we can figure out why it was said, we're going to say, my kamash malan. What has it come to teach us? There's got to be a reason behind it. And in the end, what we're going to get to is what's called a tzricha. There's a tzorach for it. There's a need for it. The need is because the first time we said it, we needed it for A, and the second time we said it, we needed it for B. So these are all things that we're going to see a lot in the Gemara. And just to review quickly, Tannaitic sources are incontrovertible. They are precise. We need to strive for unity of the sources. They have to work together, and all the statements are significant. Okay. So now we have a brayta that we just saw, and we have to resolve it with our Mishnah, according to all of those principles. So the Gemara is bothered because it says we have this Mishnah, and then we have this brayta, and it says it's not Rabbi Meir, it's not Rabbi Yehuda, it's not Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, right? None of our opinions match up. So, continuing on in the Gemara, Mani Matnitin, again it's asking, so who is it? I Rabbi Meir ha'amar bani mitzvah. Okay, so the Gemara is restating this question, and it's saying, if you say it's Rabbi Meir, remember the qualification we started the Gemara with, which was chovahu deleka ha mitzvah ika. There's no chovah, but there is a mitzvah. But Rabbi Meir here said that there's only a mitzvah and there's no chovah, right? Oh, I'm sorry. We started with the statement mizonot bitohu deino chayav hamizonot beno chayav. We started by saying if we pointed out the daughter as not being required to support her, so the son he's required, So then we look at what Rabbi Meir said, and Rabbi Meir goes on about how the mitzvah is to support the sons because they learn Torah, right? It's a mitzvah, it's not a chovah, it's not an obligation. So Rabbi Meir doesn't match our Mishnah. Everybody with me? I know you have to, what's called in Gemara, halt cup, hold your head. Hold on to it. Okay, so we can't say it's not Rabbi Meir. Is it Rabbi Yehuda? He also said that it's a mitzvah, right? Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir are very similar. The only difference between them is who's prioritized above who. Are the girls more important than the boys, or the boys more important than the girls? Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, filu mitzvah nami leika. According to Rabbi Yochanan, there's no mitzvah at all. So none of them match according to our understanding of the Mishnah, which included those 2 points added at the beginning of the Gemara. Okay, now I tried to make it a little clearer by adding you a chart. I'm very into charts when I learn Gemara because I don't have a very good memory. So I need to write things down and keep them in front of me to keep it. Okay. Okay, good. Okay, so in the Mishnah, the first understanding of it, when we have the words, ha'aveno chayav b'mizonot bito, right? I'm on the first line. So we see we're not obligated in the daughter, right? That was our first understanding of the Mishnah. Then we have the qualification in the Mishnah of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who said that the daughters you're obligated to support the daughters after the father's death, just like you're obligated to give the sons their inheritance. Obligated in the sons, in the daughters. The sons you're obligated in. From what we see in the Mishnah, all you can see is that they're obligated to get their inheritance, but nothing about their support. Okay, then we have what I wrote, Mishnah Diuk, the understanding of the Gemara of the Mishnah, which said the sons are obligated because we pointed out that the daughters weren't, so it must mean that the sons we are obligated, and the daughters, it's a mitzvah. Okay, so far so good. Then we have the Braita. We have 3 opinions in the Braita. We have Rabbi Meir, who says it's a mitzvah to give to the sons Kal v'chomer because he learns Torah, more importantly the sons, and it's also a mitzvah to give to the daughters. Rabbi Yehuda says it's a mitzvah to give to the son, but it's even more a mitzvah to give to the daughters because otherwise she would be dishonored. And the last opinion is Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, who says after the father's death there's an obligation, but there's no obligation or mitzvah in any other situation. Okay. So, like I said, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda are really saying the same thing. It's just a matter of your priorities in it. Both are a mitzvah. Which one, if you only have enough money to give one of them, which one would you give first? According to one, the son, because he learns Torah. According to the other, the daughter, because it would be a dishonor to send her out. Okay, so we have to resolve this problem that we have 3 opinions in the Braita and 1 Mishnah, and they don't seem to work together. So we're striving for unity. What's the Gemara gonna say? Now we are in source, whatever it is, after it. Yeah, source 3 after the chart on the 2nd page. Okay. Ibait Ema. If you want, you can say. If you want, you can say Rabbi Meir. Ibait Ema Rabbi Yehuda. Ibait Ema Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. The Gemara says, no, wait a second. It's not a problem. Remember, we're going for unity. We can make it work for any of them. Any one of these people could have written our Mishnah, even though from looking at the chart, it doesn't see it. How do we see that? We're going to have to backtrack from that first statement that the Gemara made. First understanding of the Gemara that said there's a chiyuv on the son, that if it said there's no chiyuv on the daughter, it must mean there was a chiyuv on the son. That understanding, we're going to have to say, wait, that doesn't work. That must be a mistaken understanding because otherwise we can't make everything. Okay, here we go. Ibait ema Rabbi Meir b'hachika. Okay, so first option is it's Rabbi Meir. And if we understand the Mishnah to match Rabbi Meir, this is what he meant to say. Ha'av eino chayav b'mizonot bito. The father is not obligated to support his daughter. V'hu hadin livno, and obviously not his, and also not his son. Ha mitzvah bebito ika, kal v'chomer lebanim, but there's a mitzvah for both and more for the sons. Bahai de katani bito. Now we're gonna have to explain then why the Mishnah talked about the daughter, because that was our problem to start with. Why did the Mishnah point out the daughter? And because of that, we have to understand that the son was obligated in the first understanding. Are you with me? Am I losing you? With me? Okay. The ha de katani bito. The fact that the Mishnah used the word bito, ha kamash malat. This is what it means to teach us. Mashmi'a lana. The afilu bito chovahu deleka ha-mitzvah ika. Even the daughter, there's no obligation to support her, but there is a mitzvah to do so. Why we have to say even the daughter? Because remember, he prioritizes the son. So he wants to point out the daughter because that's the harder case to understand. Okay, so we could make the Mishnah work with Rabbi Meir. Now we're going to try and make it work with Rabbi Yehuda. V'ibai deima Rabbi Yehuda, and if you want to say, it could be Rabbi Yehuda. V'hachi kamar, and this is what he meant to say. Ha'av eino chayav b'mizonot bito. The father is not required to support his daughter. V'kol shekain livno, and obviously not his son either. Ha mitzvah b'vno ika. There is a mitzvah for his son. The kal v'chomer lebanot, and even more so for the daughter. The ha de katani bito, and the fact that it's stated it in the Mishnah according to the daughter, ha kamash malan da afilu bito chova aleka. So now we're seeing it from the other side. It came to teach us that even the daughter, who we take more seriously because it could be dishonoring to send her out, even for her, there's no obligation. There's just a bigger mitzvah. Okay, it's a logic game here. Okay. Third case. V'bait ema Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. So how could we make it work for Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka? V'hachi ka'amar. This is what he said. Eino chayav b'mizon lo bito. You don't have to support the daughter. V'hu adin libno, and we agree about that for the son also. V'hu adin da'afilu mitzvah nami leika, and even there's no level of mitzvah here. V'aide dibanot la'achar mitat avihen chova tananami eino chayav. So this is another method that the Gemara uses, that sometimes the Mishnah, because it's using a certain language, will continue using it, because it taught about the obligation to provide for them after the father's death. They're going to keep using the word obligation. Didn't really mean to use the word obligation. So it's incorrect to infer from here that there's some kind of a mitzvah. There's no obligation and there's no mitzvah. That's how Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka reads the Mishnah. Okay, so we took the Gemara, we made a diuk, we tried to understand that because it said the daughter, it meant the son, the daughter not, it meant the son yes, which we didn't like so much. But in the end, we said that was a misunderstanding. When it says the daughter, it means the daughter and the son. We have no obligation to support either of them. Remember, over the age of 6. We canceled out that first thought, and we're left with two possible explanations of the Mishnah. One is the camp of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, who both say there's a mitzvah for both children and just squabble about who's more important. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, which says no obligation, no mitzvah, don't support the kids. Leave bounds. Okay. So the fact that there's so much discussion of priorities is really important, because it means that if there's a father who has enough money to support one or the other, we're expecting him to support them, right? Can you see how you read that into what we said? So it's clear that if he has enough to support them, he should be supporting them. It's only a question of how we prioritize in the case where he doesn't have. And we have to understand that in their reality, children of 6 were, it was acceptable to think that you could send them out to work. I know my grandfather at the age of 8 left school and worked for the family business. It's not that far off from 6. And he, he never had a chance to go back to school after that. So it's not, it sounds obscene to us, but it's really not that far off.
But with your, no one said it was ideal.
No, it wasn't, no, but my great grandfather was not a poor man. It was just what was done.
Yeah, I get that.
He was sent out to collect the money and to make the deliveries for the, business and.
And they didn't send him back to school after he. Which country?
Poland, yeah.
And I don't think it was unusual.
Look, if you think about it,
How
they
did he survive?
how did he survive? I mean, the family had a business, a successful business, and he was a worker in
What
that.
happened during?
Oh, he left Poland at the age of 16. And went to Germany, opened a business there. And then Kristallnacht, he started running with my mother's whole family, like they ran for the whole war. But he was a very, very intelligent man, and he continued to learn, he learned Torah, he went to Shiurim, he was the gabbai of his shul, he was, but he got what he needed out of school, reading, writing, arithmetic, isn't that what they say? The basics he could do, he was very good at math.
I'm necessarily good at school now.
I mean, we always used to laugh when they started with calculators, he never trusted the calculator. He always added it up himself, and then he looked at if the calculator agreed with him. But he was right.
He could add faster than you could type.
Oh,
it.
for sure.
My father could do that. No, mine still do that.
And when my father wanted to introduce a computer into the family business, he couldn't understand why, because he could keep in his head where every piece of merchandise was. And you'd say to him, he was in diamonds, and when he came to America, he'd be like, where is this stone? Oh, so and so borrowed it, and that one, that. What do you need a computer to keep track of these things? So, it's not, it sounds very, very difficult to hear, but it could be that in their reality, it wasn't that difficult.
When you part of the same as everybody else, because that's the accepted
The norm, and when it's the norm, it's.
different where we look at it and it's not the norm, and therefore it's
Right.
huge in our heads.
Right, so you have to see that clearly they're comfortable with it, and it is considered a norm to say, after 6, a child doesn't need their parent, and we can. Give them some, I mean, I'm not saying, they can run a business at the age of 6, but they can contribute, exactly. But in the end, the fact that we talk about the priorities means there is some interest in keeping them off the street. We want the boys in the Beit Midrash learning Torah, so we want to prioritize them for that. We want the girls not going out on the street and acting inappropriately. There are values there. So, it's not, we're not just throwing it out, but on the other hand, we're also acknowledging the fact that not everybody has enough to support their family. And if there's a child who can contribute to the family, maybe that's the best thing that they can do at that point. Okay. Got through that? That's good. Now, what's going to happen is there's a historical development of this law. And in the next source, okay, we're at the second paragraph or third paragraph up from the bottom, Amar Rabbi Hila, Amar Reish Lakish, you see it? Okay, so there's, Amar Rabbi Hila, Amar Reish Lakish, Mishum Rabbi Yehuda Bar Chanina. Okay, Rabbi Hila said in the name of Reish Lakish, who said in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Bar Chanina, Be'usha hitkinu sheyehei adam zan et banav et benotav kshein ktanim. In Usha, tell you in a minute where that is the name of a place. They made a takana that a person should support his children when they're small. Okay, so this seems to go against everything we've said until now. Okay, so the first thing is that our parent is going to list a couple of these takanot made in Usha, these reformations or whatever you want to call them. They appear in both Talmuds, and Usha was one of the places where the Sanhedrin was, and I gave you on the last page of your handout. That's the map of the Sanhedrin. Something I know my kids had to memorize in elementary school. Sanhedrin started out in Yerushalayim, right, in the Beit HaMikdash. Remember that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai at the end, as we're getting to the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, he meets with Vespasian, Aspasianus, and he says, give me Yavna, and
Yeah.
right, give me Yavna, and he wants to move the Sanhedrin to Yavna. And so they move. So he says here, Yavna reestablished Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai after the destruction around 70 to 90. So they move across. Now what happens is that 70 is the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, 130 is the Bar Kokhba rebellion. So somewhere between those two periods, the Jews of what they call the South, which is really Yerushalayim area, Merkaz area, that the center of Judaism moves from there up into the Galilee. Okay, so, and you see that the Sanhedrin goes with it, goes up to Usha. And then they're in Usha for about 50 years. But that's where Rabbi Gamliel of Yavna comes from Yavna to Usha, founds the Sanhedrin there, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, when he was young, that's where he started out. Okay, this is before he wrote the Mishnah. From Usha, it moves to Shfar'am. You can go to all these places and visit, it's very cool. And then to Beit Sha'arim. If you go to Beit Sha'arim, they have there's a national park there. There's caves, you can go in. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is buried there. It's very cool. Hmm? Yeah. And so in Beit Sha'arim, he wrote the Mishnah. And then from Beit Sha'arim, you can do like a whole tour of the national parks. You can go to Tzipori. Tzipori, he moves Tzipori at that point. And they're there for about 20 years. They do some very cool recreations in the Tzipori National Park of like, can walk around and like Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is walking by and like, on the Chagim on Chol HaMoed, it's very cool. And in the end, they end up in Tiberia. That's the final place that they are. And that's where they say, that was the end of Smicha, the end of the whole Jewish population fell apart at that point. There was so much persecution by the Romans about learning Torah. You couldn't learn Torah and things like that. Sanhedrin falls apart around the 3rd century. And the very last thing that they do is Hillel sets up the calendar, like the permanent calendar, because we can't have the fires setting Rosh Chodesh, and we can't have a calendar that's dependent on Edim and all of that stuff. So pretty much the last action of the Sanhedrin is to formalize the calendar. And they say that the Sanhedrin ended in Tver and it will restart in Tver. So okay, so that's Usha. So we are in Usha now, and so we know that what we're talking about is about the period just after the Bar Kokhba rebellion, Rabbi Yehuda Bar Chanina, like the beginning, almost towards the period of the beginning of the Moraim. That's the, between the end of the Mishnah and the beginning of the Gemara, that's around the period that we're talking. Okay. Okay, so now, so it seems that we have Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah in our Mishnah, which is like, he lived in the Yavna, if you want to look at all the stops, who says there's no obligation to support the Ketanim. And then we have the Usha generation saying that Sheyehei Adam Zanit Banav Uvnotav Kshem Ketanim, that they should be supporting them. Rabbi Huda and Rabbi Meir are also of the Usha generation. And they're the ones who say that it's a mitzvah, right? So it seems like they knew about this takana, but they weren't really sure what to do with it, and maybe what the priorities were, unclear. So now the Gemara asks, okay, so we saw the Mishnah and we saw the takana. They asked them, Hilchat Akvate, or Ein Hilchat Akvate, do we follow this takana? does a person have to feed his children? Okay, it's a funny thing to ask, because usually if the Gemara says there's a takana, then we just assume it brought it because there was a takana. You know, and okay, that's the new rule. But it seems that it's introducing the question because there is a question. They're gonna bring us sources now to show that it's very unclear that this was accepted, what they said.
They also said, they acknowledged that for the change, whatever had come before, in Usha, they instituted this,
Change.
they said, okay, enough of that, like,
But I think it's like, you kind of hear the Takanavush and you think like, oh, good, because like, I was really not comfortable with them saying don't support the children, so obviously they felt the same way, and so they came in Usha and they said, you know, what's up with this? We gotta change it, we have to say that people should support their children, which on the one hand makes me feel better because that agrees with, you know, aligns with my moral
Yeah.
whatever. On the other hand, what was going on that they felt they need to say something about it? Were people not supporting their children and therefore they felt like they had to reinforce the need to support your
maybe some
children?
not supported their daughters and some are not supporting their sons, depending on which opinion, so if you do put the takana to do both, covers everyone.
Okay, so you're saying it was sons or daughters? I don't know, maybe.
I don't know.
I don't know. So let's see what they bring. Tashma. Tashma is how the Gemara says, come and hear. In other words, I'm going to bring you a source now that's going to change things. Interesting that I always think about it, that in the Bavli, it says Tashma. When you learn Yerushalmi Gemaras, it says Tachazi, come here. Let's think about what's the difference. Come see. What's the difference between the fact that the Bavlim said come and hear, and the Yerushalmi said come and see? I'm sure there's a lot to say about it. I don't think about it.
Someone's written a thesis on it.
I'm sure. I'll have to look for it. Okay, so here's the source they're gonna say. Kihava Ato, and it's a story. Okay, remember we said that when we talk about things being precise, also actions are precise. When they describe the actions of one of the Tanaim or the Amoraim, they're telling us that story not because, hey, he did that, but because it's here to learn from, and therefore whatever they did is precise in some way. Kihava Atu Lakame de Rav Yehuda Amar Lahu. They would come before Rav Yehuda and say to him, well, why would they come before Rav Yehuda? To complain about a father who was refusing to support his children. Yarud Yalda Abnei Mata Shadia said the Yarud, the jackal, gave birth and then just gave it to the people of the city to raise. Like, what does this mean? He has children and now we're supposed to support them? Even a jackal will support its young. What's up with this person? A father should support his children. Okay, so that's the case that came before Rabbi Yehuda. The question is, so the case was that they said that the father wouldn't support, and his answer was, even a jackal supports his children. We are in.
It's the bottom.
It's the very bottom of stage 2. Tashma, Kihava Atu Lakame. See it? Okay. Very bottom.
Tashma.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so our first Tashma, our first example is of Rav Yehuda, who they came to complain that someone wasn't paying, and he said even a jackal. Like, he made like a very Musar kind of statement about the guy. You know, everyone should support their children, even a jackal, which is not the nicest animal on earth, will support its children. Now another story. Kihava Atu Lakame de Rav Chisda, the same question came before Rav Chisda. Amar Lahu, so what was his answer to what do we do about this father who won't take care of his children? Kfole Asita Bitsibura. Turn over, they translate it as a mortar for him in public. Velekum velema, like make a platform and let him get on it and say, Orva bai bane, vaugava lo bai bane. Yeah, it's like I think of the Scarlet Letter. He's got to get up in front of everyone and he's got to proclaim a raven will feed the children and this man, meaning himself, will not. Okay. So we have two interesting examples, Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Chisda. What do they have in common? Okay, that's one, the animals, which goes all the time back to that natural morality and morality that we see from the world, right? Also interesting, what kind of answers are these?
It's saying it's like obvious that you have to support your kids.
Okay, which means
Yes.
shaming, musser, there's no like, here comes the bait in to put you in jail, or here come the gabaim to forcibly collect the money. It's not a legal answer.
You are ethically obliged.
You are ethically obliged to do this, exactly. There's no halachic legal obligation here, right? Which, why is that surprising to us, or not surprising?
This is what we're trying to learn now.
Because the Mishnah said there's no halachic obligation, but the Takanot Usha said there is an obligation. So what can we learn from this?
Maybe to know different age kids.
Different aged kids, that's possible, but I don't think so.
Or
I
if
think,
you
I
were
think,
listening to the Takanot.
remember what question we're answering? We're answering the question, did we follow the halacha of Usha or didn't we? Apparently, we did not, exactly. Okay,
I think for people who felt they didn't have to suddenly say, oh, hold on a second, now they're suddenly saying, would you have to, like, for somebody who, let's say that this person who doesn't want to, because they bring you in front of somebody, he wasn't the rule, he was the exception, because most people were feeding their kids.
so you're saying we can learn from this that most people were feeding their kids because they bothered to point him out to the rock.
Yes, it's not that
Okay.
nobody's feeding their kids,
Right.
so therefore we try, you're saying, this person is not feeding their kids, and maybe the implication is, and they could afford to. Because he's going, the letter of the law says I don't need to, therefore.
Right, he's
I'm
being
not.
very, very,
They say, yeah, the
Letter of
letter
the
of the
law.
law, but it's not, that's not the right ethical. I mean, I don't know if that's true, I'm just saying that that's.
It might not be, it could be that communities were very much using,
Turn one support their.
I would have thought it might have become a more public problem.
Oh.
If it had been one person, maybe not, the community would, as a community.
you're saying the fact that they're complaining shows that there was more than one child to support, because otherwise, okay, well, just the tzedakah can support it. Yeah, but you can read it both ways. You can read it both ways, absolutely. So if they're complaining, obviously it's becoming a weight on the community and they're worried about it. That could be. So let's see. So Rav Yehuda brings the example of the jackal. He gives this kind of critical answer to them. I think Rav Chisda's action is much stronger. He makes the guy go out in public and proclaim before everyone on this upturned border, you know, and then there are a lot of
There's a
Perushim.
little bit of punishment. The first one was just appealing to his moral.
Right, he's just giving mussar.
He's actually making him.
The second one is real shaming,
Yeah.
you know, like what we would call shaming today. And there's a whole discussion there. What does it mean that he would turn over the border and make him stand on it? What does that symbolize? And there's a whole lot of Perushim. Brought you a few of them here. One, the Ritva says it's a curse. Let his income be overturned. Like if he's not gonna use his money to support his kids, let him not have any money. I less like that. The Maharal says this is an overturning of Seder Bereshit. In other words, what this man is doing is against all natural ethical thoughts. He's turning upside down the way the world is supposed to run. The world is supposed to be a world in which parents support their children. He's done the opposite, so we're turning it over. Thought that was a nice interpretation. So the question is why the Gemara, we could have said, okay, Usha made a takana, let's stick with it, let's enforce it, let's make it a law, but they chose not to. So why did they leave it as relying on the ethical or moral conscience of the person, right? So sometimes you could say that it points to like a weakness in the system, like you look at Agunot, why is there no legal solution to the situation of Agunot? But in other situations, you could say that they wanted the things to be left to people's moral intuition. They wanted people to feel moral and ethical decisions. And that was like a chinuchi decision. It was an educational decision. We want people to feel that things are in their hand, not to tell them everything they have to do and then just they follow A, B, and C, but let them think a little. And it's a very educational. It's like when you have a child and you set them all kinds of standards, right? And you have your parental authority and you can put your foot down and you can say, if you don't do this, you're not going to B'nai Akiva this week, or if you're not, you can use your authority to enforce all kinds of things, but it's not always the right educational choice. Because if you say to them, I expect you to do this, and then they say to you, well, what are you gonna do if I don't do it, right? Or, are you gonna make me do it? So now what have you done? You've put the power of the decision in their hands, right? And you say to them, I won't do anything, but I expect you to do this, right? And that's giving the child freedom of choice, and it's a powerful tool. Education, right? So first of all, it says to a person, you need a moral compass. You need to make decisions that fit your way of life, and you need to think about that. And also that there's a limit to the authority of the parent or the educator, like, there's a place where you need to step up. So I think it like ties into how we started this class about, the question of natural morality. How do we inculcate our values into our children? Part of that is stepping back and not making everything into a hard and fast rule, but saying, make your choices and think about why you're making those choices and what your values are in making those choices. So if you can't choose your children, I think we're in big trouble. If people can't get to the correct moral decision that supporting their children is high on the list of priorities, I think we're, that indicates a big problem. So that was, okay, so those were the answers of Rav Yehuda and Rav Chisda. Now the Gemara goes off onto like a little tangent, referring to Rav Chisda's comment that what did the man have to say when he stood up on that platform? He had to say, the raven cares for its sons and I don't want to, right? So the Gemara asks question. Now the raven is very loaded symbol. Even in non-Jewish lore, however you say it. For example, every animal has its collective nouns, right? You have like a flock of sheep, and you have a pack of wolves. What is a group of ravens? Apparently, it's a conspiracy of ravens, a treachery of ravens, or an unkindness of ravens. What does this tell us about what people think of ravens? Very similar to the crow, which is very similar, similar bird, they're related. It's a murder of crows.
We don't like having they're not, I don't, they're scary birds.
Okay, so the raven has a lot in general lore, and in Tanakh, it is a negative symbol. So the Gemara comes and asks a question. And now we are on, oh wow, we are running late, okay. We are on the second paragraph of the first source on page 3. The orva bai bane. The man would say the raven cares for its son and I don't want to. He says the raven, does the raven really care for its son? Haktiv livnei orev asher yikru. It says in Tehillim that Hashem feeds the children of the raven that call out because their father doesn't feed them. Lo kashya. Remember, we always have to make everything work together. So we're going to say lo kashya, lo kasher. We're going to make these two sources work together. Haba chivare, haba ukame. There are two kinds of ravens. There are white ravens and there are black ravens. And one statement is talking about the white ravens and one statement is talking about the black ravens. Now, this is not a lesson in zoology. That's not what it's coming to say. It's saying there's an ambivalency maybe in this allegory and in the explanation. But we do know, if we look in the pasuk I brought you from Eov in source 4, it says Mi achino orev tzedo ki yeladav el yishavehu. Who will provide food for the raven when its children call out to Hashem because they're not getting enough food? They wander around, they have no food. So the pasuk in Eov is telling us that the raven does not feed its children, right? And the Ramban on that in source 5 says, Ki gam la'of tameh hashachor hanivzeh ba'ofod. Also, this tameh bird, which is the most despised of all the birds, Yachin ha'el tzido, even for those most despised birds, Hashem will provide food. That's why he chose in Eov to choose the example of the raven. The El Yiladav Aktanim Ke'elu Shavu ve'alta Shabbat Ke'ilu Shavu ve'alta Shabbatam lefanav Shamayma, as if Hashem heard the little raven chicks, calling out to him. And Rabotenu had taught that he distances himself from his children. So it's hard to imagine that Rav Chisda didn't know this. I mean, it says it right out in Eov. The raven is known for not feeding its children. So why did Rav Chisda say that the man has to say the raven feeds his children and I don't? So there's a midrash that says that the reason why does the raven not want to feed its children? So apparently, remember we said there are two types of ravens, black and white? Apparently, ravens are born white. Now comes the zoology lesson. And when they grow up, they're black. So the raven father, when he comes to the nest and he sees little white babies, he says, those aren't my kids. I'm not going to feed them. Okay, so he has no compassion for them because he thinks he's been, what's the word, cuckolded, right? And so what Rav Chisda is saying is, okay, he may be wrong, but he has like a logic to what he's saying. Like if this man who I put up on the platform said to me, I'm not going to support these kids because I think they're mamzer, they're not my kids. Okay, then maybe we had what to talk about. The raven thinks they're not his kids. You know they're your kids, and you're still not supporting them. You're even worse than the raven. So there's no justification for what you're doing, is what Rav Chisda is saying. So I was preparing this lesson, and then of course it's Parshat Noach. I thought to myself, well, why did Noach send out a raven? And he's such a bad symbol. So then I went down the rabbit hole. Oh my God, I have 2 minutes. I went down the rabbit hole looking for reasons why Noach would pick a raven to send out. And there were a lot of good explanations. So I'll just run through a couple of them in 2 minutes and we'll finish with that. The raven is a scavenger, feeds on death and destruction. So when he sent the raven out, this is Rashi, if it had found food, it would have found carcasses, it would not have returned. So when he couldn't find any carcasses, he knew that the earth wasn't exposed. Another one is that the dove is a very delicate bird. The raven is a very hardy bird. And he needed something that, he was sending out into an unknown, desolate situation. So he was precisely the right bird for this reconnaissance trip because it's a very hardy bird. That's what the Environment House says. There's another explanation that says it was a moral test. There's a medrash that talks about how the raven gets very insulted when he chose him because he said, I'm impure, you don't like me, what are you choosing me for this? And the Zohar, the Maharal, in light of the Zohar, talk about it as being the raven represents the moral confusion that remains from the before the flood. Kind of like, we're not 100%, the world is new, but it's not pure. And the first thing that goes out is this impure bird. And it kind of says, yeah, we're restarting, but it's not going to be perfect. The one that I like the most is that the raven sets the stage for the dove. Because the dove is hope and peace and renewal. And the raven is where we are in the world at that moment, harsh and broken and not quite ready. So the first stage is the raven. And Rav Kook says the raven must go before the dove. You have to go through the hard stuff before you can get to the peace, love, and happiness that the dove represents. So so that's why he had to do it in two stages. First the raven and then the dove. We'll have to continue next week because I have to run out of time.
The rape. Protected in the Tower of London.
Oh, right, the ravens in the Tower of London. I forgot about those.
There's trouble.
That's the end of the monarchy. And yeah.
Oh, they symbolize the end of the monarchy if they disappear? If they disappear.
It's so interesting, a conspiracy of ravens or a treachery of ravens. That's where all these kings and the queens who were indicted, yes, for.
They'd be put in the Tower of London.
And they were,
Yeah.
and yet you got it.
The ravens have to stab the rabbits. It's a bad sign if they leave, not if they're dead.
It's interesting.
So very interesting things about Egyptian cut the sun up to about a year and a half ago, we had a large garden, we had crows at the back of the garden.
You had a murder of crows?
But they protect their young. One day, one of its young had fallen out the nest carrier. It wasn't a tiny fledge, it was a big one. And the crow came down. My husband used to go out about to go to the shore. Came down and attacked him. And he remembered my
You got
husband.
attacked by a crow?
Yes, and he remembered my husband. Every time my husband would go out, I came to shore, he would attack him. He didn't attack me. Didn't take my kids, but attacked my husband. So there's a protective.
Did your husband support your children?
Very interesting. Now there's a scaffolding thing. There was in the back of our house, with the brush, there were loads of big trees.